think I'll actually switch these. I'll give you a roadmap update first and I'll give you a little more time to think about if you've got any hot issues or focus areas or other things to bring up. So the biggest one today, I just wanted to give an update on our roadmap. At the moment, so since Nicole left GitLab, I'm acting as the interim product manager for the secure stage composition analysis team. And as part of that, we ended up revamping their priorities to focus on continuous vulnerability scanning. And I share this because the Protect team has a joint interest in this, and we're helping out a lot with this as well. So this is going to impact both of us, both container and dependency scanning. So I thought it would be useful for you just to be aware of this epic. We're actually deferring a lot of other new feature work in favor of picking this up. If you're familiar with the backend details of how dependency scanning works, it just produces an artifact file with all of the dependencies. And then when we show it in the dependency list, it's actually not pulling from the database. It's actually parsing through that artifact file that's stored and displaying that information directly from that file. And that works for this for an MVC, but it's not very scalable if we ever wanted to show this at the group level, or if we ever wanted you to be able to search in here, so somebody who's trying to search for log4j across their organization, parsing all of those artifact files for thousands of projects and then bubbling those up to the group level and then searching them would just be, it's just not scalable at all. So it's really limited our ability to surface this up higher. And so what we're actually planning to do is have container and dependency scanning output just raw Cyclone DX formatted artifacts that will then get read into the GitLab database and stored there as a list of dependencies that are being used by that project. And so once we store that in the database, that's going to, unlock all of those technical barriers that were previously preventing us from being able to do this at the group level. But it also comes with another nice side effect of, because we're storing these dependencies in the database, what we can actually do is bring in our advisory database into the GitLab database as well. And then we can run this vulnerability match service anytime either of those two items change. And so this actually lets us move the scanning itself out of the pipeline and into the back end, and it makes it continuous. So again, instead of a pipeline driven approach, it's driven on change. So anytime your dependencies change, you're going to run a pipeline that's going to generate a new SBOM that's going to be pushed into the database, and that will trigger the vulnerability match service. And then also anytime our advisory database gets an update, we can rerun that service. So again, kind of a side effect of this is that this dependency list and then the list of vulnerabilities in your vulnerability report have the potential to just always be up to date with the latest advisory data all the time, even without running an additional pipeline. And I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff out here in a really short period of time, so just stop me if I need to go through any of this in more detail.
Just a quick question on that. So I can link the epic in the agenda. Sorry, it's still like 9 a.m. here, and I apparently don't know how to work this early anymore. But is one of the eventual goals going to be able to have like organization-wide searches for customers, like when log4j vulnerabilities hit, instead of having to go through the longer process and using our API to find those potential vulnerabilities within repos, we have a different mechanism?
Yes.
I think that will be big for customers.
Yes.
That's great.
Exactly. Storing it in the database is kind of that prerequisite. And then, once we have that done and we have those continuous vulnerability scans, then we can move on to things like having a group level dependency list or being able to filter and search it. So we've got both of those on our future roadmap, but they are both blocked by getting that information in the database first.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't know that that's how the scanning worked for these vulnerabilities. So that's really good to know.
Yeah, so that's a big reason why we're prioritizing this. Another big reason that we're prioritizing this is currently our license compliance solution, our use of License Finder is just, it's draining the team's time because the upstream project is not well maintained. And so we're taking on that maintenance burden, and the end result is that the team has really been underwater for the last year and has not really been able to focus as much as they would like on new feature development. So as part of this change, we're planning to replace License Finder. It won't officially be replaced until 16.0, but we're going to store the license data in the database as well. And just like the vulnerabilities, we're going to be able to have this license match service where we match the list of dependencies with the appropriate license. And then anytime either of these two change, we can just update it live. And so that will allow the license piece, the license compliance piece to run just by running container and dependency scanning. You'll no longer even have to run a separate license compliance job in your pipeline. It'll just happen automatically. And it'll also free up the engineering team a ton because, like I said, maintaining the current solution is a really big maintenance burden right now.
Sam, I have a quick question about that. So traditionally, license match used to be a separate policy type thing where you could really block up the merge request if a license was on the deny list. If that moves into the container dependency scanning, will that sort of trigger that policy anytime you're just trying to do a container scan moving forward?
Correct. So the container and dependency scanning, they won't even be doing scanning. Scanning will kind of not really be an accurate term anymore, to be honest. It's more like an SBOM generator, right? It's your container SBOM generator and it's your dependency SBOM generator. And so that's finding the list of components, and then the components get matched on the back end in Rails to determine which licenses are associated with those components and which vulnerabilities are associated with those components. So yes, you will still be able to enforce that on the merge request. And actually, this is another item that's in our backlog, if I can find it. But adding in license approval policies and replacing license checks. So just like we went through this whole migration away from vulnerability check and we moved that into a security approval policy, we actually want to do the same thing and move these license approval policies into that policy editor. We have sort of a prototype here of, if the license scanner finds more than 0 of these licenses, then I want to require approval from these individuals. So the idea is to consolidate all of these in that policy editor at a future point in time.
Cool.
So I know I've kind of deviated and I'm presenting a lot on the composition analysis roadmap, and technically this is for secure, but I just wanted to share all of this because of the overlap that it has with container scanning, which is owned by Protect. And so the net result is we're actually collaborating between the two teams. Both teams are pooling resources to help make this happen and to help make it happen a little bit more quickly than it could otherwise.
Very cool. Sam, I do have a couple of questions with regards to somewhat Protect and somewhat around what you just presented. Are we at a point where we can move into that, or do you have anything else you want to present first?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. So number one, is all of this going to work on Red Hat OpenShift or not? That's the first question. If it already does, how are we making sure that it continues to?
Yeah, it already does. Container scanning supports Red Hat OpenShift. Dependency scanning supports Red Hat OpenShift. I'm actually not sure about License Finder. I think that's the only thing that might not. I will have to double check on that. But obviously, once we replace it, then you'll no longer have that license compliance image. So then it will. So the short answer is yes, this will continue to work on Red Hat OpenShift. And if anything, actually, we might be expanding our support by adding license compliance support for Red Hat OpenShift.
Okay, and specifically, I'm interested in the concerns that a lot of my customers have around the rootless containers problem that we seem to have with the secure containers running in OpenShift. So some of these require root privileges. That's the problem.
I thought that we addressed that for everything except for license compliance. Are you still seeing problems on OpenShift?
Yeah, there was an issue, and I'd have to go find it, that actually had details on what is not operational still.
So we tested it on OpenShift, and I believe we officially support it. No, we don't call it out here.
Yeah.
Just in case it was 2 words. We had an epic where we explicitly made changes here so that we are not running as the root user. We're creating a new GitLab user and we're running as the GitLab user. Both of them really should be working on OpenShift.
Okay.
If they're not, that would be a bug. You should open an issue or tag me in on an issue if there's already one there.
Okay, I'll validate that and get back to you. I just want to, I mean, we don't need to get into whether it is there or not. I just want to be sure that we continue keep our eyes on it and don't forget it, because, you know, in a further iteration, and I'm just throwing this out there, it's possible that the product team might say, oh, well, you know, for this license manager, we're going to need some sort of root privilege. So we're going to go back to having a root, you know, a root user there and undo the work that's been done. That's kind of where I'm coming at.
Yeah, I'm less sure about dependency scanning because I'm newer to that one, and that one actually does have to build the application, so it might need root privileges, but regardless, we're doing a lot less work in the pipeline than we were before, right?
Right.
So it's only going to make OpenShift support better, not worse, with this change, because we're shifting a lot of that logic out and into Rails.
Cool. Okay, good. The second thing that I had a question about was with regards to, you may have covered this in the past, and I apologize if I've forgotten about it. Customer was asking, how do I scan for vulnerabilities in running containers that have been deployed in Kubernetes via GitLab's Kubernetes agent, and see that result? And my suggestion to them was, yeah, you can do that. And I forget the name of the tool that we had for real-time live scanning. Am I kind of off the track on that, Sam, or is that, am I recollecting that correctly?
We were using Starboard as probably the tool.
Starboard, that was the one, yeah.
We actually no longer require you to install Starboard to do that. So that was a great improvement that we made. It's actually very easy to scan your production environment now. All you have to do is install the GitLab agent, And then you just set up this cadence for how quickly you want it to run. I think we have this, it still mentions starboard here as just, because we can't like remove or deprecate these things until major releases. So it still mentions starboard, but we're actually not even using starboard anymore. You no longer have to install starboard into your cluster. We found that we were actually only using a few lines of code from starboard. And so we ended up it's an open source project. So we ended up just taking that code and including it directly in the GitLab Kubernetes agent to save users from needing to install the entire starboard project, which does a lot more than just this. So yeah, you can specify which namespaces are scanned, you can specify the cadence, and there are actually going to be two ways of setting this up. One is, let's see here. So I'm trying to find, we need to update our documentation because I'm not seeing it. The first way is to configure it in your agent config is where you would do that. So when you set up your GitLab Kubernetes agent. The second way, which is still under development at the moment, is to actually configure it using a security policy. And so that would be useful if you're trying to provide separation of duties between your ops team that's responsible for installing the agent and your security team that actually wants to enforce that the security scans are run outside of the ops team that has the GitLab Kubernetes agent installed. Once we get all of that done, it is still in alpha at the moment, but we're getting very close to going straight from alpha over to GA here. Currently, we're projecting like 15.2, I believe, with a small possibility of getting it in 15.1.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that, Sam, because as you noticed in the documentation, it does talk about Starboard. And that, I think that's what I mentioned to the customer. But the vulnerabilities would show up in the screenshot. Where's that from? I'm not placing that in my head exactly where that screenshot is coming from.
They show up on the vulnerability report. And they show up in operational.
That was it. Okay.
And then they also show up, the screenshot you're seeing here is of the agent itself. So this is showing everything for the entire project. If you want to come in to the actual agent that's installed, we have a security tab for that agent that you can view vulnerability specific for this cluster.
So if I were sharing the agent, which is a very common pattern, right, is to create the agent project, share it at a group level, and then all the projects within that group then use that agent to deploy. Yep. Would the security scan results show up for all of those projects in that agent's view?
On this page, it's going to show everything for this agent. And then on the vulnerability report, it's going to show it
for the project.
Actually, it's also going to show everything for that agent in both locations, I believe.
Okay.
Because we don't have a way to map it back to the project, right? We just
right.
And there's no way to make that linking between which project is which.
Yeah.
We do have things coming though, so that you can filter. We're adding some additional filters here soon, so that you can filter by agent, by your cluster, and then you can also filter by image potentially.
Are you planning on putting a filter for CVEs?
So I'm not. I know Matt Wilson. So Matt Wilson actually owns this page. So we're just.
Oh yeah. Okay. Never mind.
He's got a whole plan to add in like better search and filter. I don't know if he's including CVEs in that, but whatever they do here, we would get the benefit of that as well.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you for clarifying that as well, Sam, because that was the missing piece, and the agent is very new, and so trying to kind of figure some of this stuff out is a little bit of a challenge. But thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, no problem. And, you know, I recognize it's been in alpha for a long time. It is still in alpha. So, you know, we reserve the right to make breaking changes to it without notice and outside of major releases, you know, because that's why we're keeping it in alpha, is because we are making some of these big changes, like, you know, oh, you know, starboard is no longer required. And, you know, it is very much still under development, but we're hoping that once we get it and officially announce it as GA ready here, you know, that's when we really expect it to be stable and, you know, ready for production use. Yeah, great questions. Any other
Sam,
questions?
I have a,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
might be a Matt question since he maintains this page, but one of the things that we were looking into for ephemeral hosts or ephemeral containers was the fact that you could have a detected field, but also a last seen field. Is that something that has come up from other customers before?
I have not heard customers request a last seen field.
Okay.
But again, that's not like, that would be Matt's area in secure, so I'm not actively
Sure.
getting feedback there, but I have not heard that at all.
Okay.
I thought so Sam, if you don't mind clicking into one of those vulnerabilities.
Yeah, sure.
I thought this one had, yeah, detected, it has, and then I think,
Find another that has more information.
yeah, I believe that there's a trail now where it adds information of when it was last seen.
Okay.
I haven't seen that in here. That doesn't mean that you're not correct, but
Maybe I just saw an issue about it, but I know there was some conversation about that, Francis.
Okay.
I just can't recall it ever making it on that summary page. I thought it was in the detail page. That's how I recall it to be.
I can follow up with Matt on that. Thank you.
All right, any other questions here? So good. So the only other thing that I wanted to raise your visibility into is just that we are getting close to having group level security policies come out as well. I know this one's been one that we've been working on for quite a while, and a lot of customers have requested it. Let's see if I can find it here, add support for group level policies. So this one's getting close. It's probably not going to be turned on. The feature flag probably won't be turned on until 15.2 is where this one's in, but it's getting really close. So there is an off chance it makes it into 15.1, I suppose. When we do release this, it actually is going to only support scan execution policies for the first iteration, and then we'll be adding in support for scan result policies as another follow-on step. So I did want you to just be aware of that. You know, if your customers come in and it's not working for scan result policies or what, you know, I don't want that to be like a big surprise out to the field, and just know that we do have a separate epic for that, and we are planning to work on that just iteratively.
That's awesome. Thank you, Sam, because this is great. From a scalability perspective, that just completely is awesome. Now, how far up the group can you go in that, or is there no limit? So is it just the penultimate group, or is it like all the way up?
Yeah, there's no limit. It's on subgroups and groups. So it'll be there for all of them, and they just flow down to anything that's inside their container. We actually built this on the brand new namespace object. If we dive into the technical backend details, which will allow us to easily take advantage of workspace as soon as it's available. So we have one set of code that gets reused for project, subgroup, group, and potentially workspace in the future once it's available.
That's awesome. Now, how about access control for that? Is it still like, I think owner and
Yep.
was it maintainer?
Not maintainer. So only owners can change the linked security policy project. And then it's up to them to determine who they give access to that security policy project. They can give developer and maintainer access out just like you would with any other project. And so they can make those decisions on their own.
Very cool. I'm just waiting to see how that whole snowball effect happens when you have multiple groups, and like at the grandfather group, you've got something, and then the middle group, you get something else. And then at the bottom project level, it's like yet another policy. Fun times.
You have some limits that you should be aware of as well. So I believe we have a max, I forget if it's 5 or 7 total policies. I think it's 5. You can only have 5 policies of each type.
Okay.
So you can actually end up having more because of that snowball effect, but the additional ones will get ignored. So we have another issue to revisit that limit because it's not really something that users have run into yet. Well, it's just at the project level, but they're likely to run into it earlier. And we had to implement that limit to get the code merged in due to make some maintainer concerns. So it's just part of working iteratively here at GitLab, but there is a limit. I believe it's 5 of each type of policy that can actually be applied.
And one last question. I promise I don't want to take over this call and keep asking questions. I want to get to Taylor and Francis another chance. But with regards to the policies themselves, a very common question that comes up is if I have a custom scanner that I've integrated, do the policies work with that? And I haven't kind of played around with it to know whether it's yes or no. Do you know the answer?
Yeah, so it depends is the answer. If they're feeding in their vulnerabilities the way they should, it will just get bucketed under SAST, DAST, container scanning, or one of those others. And so it's just going to be treated the same as one of our scanners. There are some scanners out there, I believe, that do not. So we have an open epic to add better support for external scanners. Right now, if you set it to all, it will catch those as well. So you can always just say apply your policy to all scanners. But we are looking at adding another like external option if they're using some other name besides our standard list that will just give them a free form text box that they can put something in to match on.
And that's inclusive of anything they've added manually, right?
Right.
Cool. Thank you. Oh, Taylor left. Sorry.
Right, well, we are at time. Please feel free to reach out async, I guess, in the channel if you have any other questions or areas to surface up. I have to drop for a meeting as well, but thanks everyone for joining today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Great call, Sam.
Of course. Take care. Bye.